Hey, what's going on guys? My name is Matthew from Tech here, and today we're going to be discussing Intel and what just on earth is going on with Intel at the moment. And we're going to look at the current state of the CPU market, what Intel is currently doing, and we're also going to touch on my buyer's remorse of buying Intel last year. So let's jump straight into it and discuss just what on earth is going on at Intel. So, if you've been following PC hardware news for any sort of time now, you would know Intel's in a spot of bother, not only because they had their own internal struggles with their investors and managing team, they've also had tough competition and essentially an arse whooping from AMD, with the release of Ryzen in general has been slowly edging towards Intel's throne. And with the recent release of Ryzen 5000 or Zen 3 architecture, AMD has finally come out swinging and has dethroned Intel as the top gaming king. Now, AMD for a little while has been the multi-core, multi-threaded king for quite a while, but they finally dethroned Intel's top CPU at the time, which was the Intel i9-10100K, in single-threaded performance, which that was Intel's claim to fame. That was Intel's only shot at holding on to its title was, yes, we got the best gaming CPUs because our IPC performance and our top core clock speeds are the best, so we're the best for gaming. But with Ryzen 5000, they can't say that anymore. We've even seen it, for example, the i9-10100K being beaten by the Ryzen 5 5600X, a 6-core 12-threaded CPU that costs £300, which I'm annoyed. Why am I annoyed? Because I bought the i9-10100K. I spent £530 on that processor last year, which is the downside of PC technology. As technology is always advancing, you're always going to have that buyer's remorse no matter when. I bought this last May, and if I knew just how good Ryzen 5000 was going to be, I would have wanted to have held on just a bit longer, just so I could have got that top CPU performance. In terms of single core performance and also multi-threaded performance, a Ryzen 9 would have been perfect. But I bought what I did at the time, and do I regret it? Partially, but also no, because at the time I bought what I did and that was the best gaming performing CPU at the time. It still got 10 cores, 20 threads, I can't really complain. But that's buyer's remorse for you, especially in PC technology. New processors, graphics cards coming out every year or two. No matter when you buy, you always run the risk of buyer's remorse. Yes, I'm feeling it now, but also with the current supply issues of CPUs, GPUs and semiconductors in general, I'm sort of glad that I did buy the i9 in the end, due to the fact of how limited and hard to get Ryzen 9 5000 is at the moment. But what is Intel currently doing? Why have they fallen so far behind? Well, a lot of internal struggles of 14nm. Now, 14nm has been the process node Intel's been using since Skylake, and it's annoyed me that even the new 11th gen Intel CPUs are going to be using a version of the 14nm process node, which is crazy. What are we on now? 14nm plus. I've lost count of just how far and how long we've been on 14nm. It's crazy. And it's sad to see Intel actually get left behind in the dust, because they were promising 10nm for ages. We were supposed to get 10nm in 2018, and what year is it now? It's 2021, and we're still waiting for it on the desktop. Given, yes, they're starting to roll out 10nm on the mobile platforms, which is a welcome move, and I hope to see it trickle down to desktop soon, but AMD is currently using TSMC 7nm process. Yeah, it's crazy to think how AMD is now on the forefront and is now the advanced company. But we're also now going to talk about the recent leaked benchmarks of the new i9-11900K, which this is Intel in pure survival mode. Why? Because the new i9-11900K is an 8-core, 18-thread part. Last year's 10100K was a 10-core, 20-threaded CPU, which you're probably thinking, why have they downgraded the core count? Truth be told, the reason why they've done this because Intel knows that they've messed up big time, and they're trying to hold on for that single core performance as much as they can, which is why they've reduced the core count so they can up the power limits and put more powers into each of the individual cores to achieve a higher clock speed. So that's why they've reduced the overall package size of the CPU so they can increase the power limits. So the recent Geekbench 5 benchmark shows that the new i9 topped out with a single core score of 1005 and a multi-core score of 11,048, which shows a 35% increase in single core performance over its predecessor of the i9 100K, but in terms of multi-core score, it's roughly about the same. Though it's important to note that compared to the Ryzen 9 5950X, it actually beat the Ryzen 9 5950X by about 13% in single core performance, but in multi-core performance, the Ryzen 9 5950X was about 52% better compared to the 1100K, which, yeah, that multi-core score, especially for someone who's going to be buying such a high core count CPU for productivity, yeah, it's a given. You're going to go for the Ryzen 9. Our more comparable CPU in terms of core count would be the Ryzen 7 5850X, which in single core performance scored 1682 compared to the i9 is about 14% slower, which shows that Intel has made gains in the single core performance and they're coming fighting hard for that single core performance to try and say we have the best gaming CPU, though our CPUs are not good for anything else apart from gaming. But we're still holding on to that dear title because at this point we've got nothing else to hold on to and we are in pure survival mode at this rate. And it beat the Ryzen 7 in multi-core performance as well by about 5.5%, which is good to see. But at the same time, the Ryzen 7 5850X is going to be about £100 cheaper than the i9 processor. So yeah, the Ryzen 7 is still a better value for money. You're still getting roughly similar performance and it's going to be a lot cheaper, so the price differences are quite significant still, especially for this price range. A £400 versus a £500 CPU, that's quite a big chunk still, and it's crucial to see just how Intel's stretching 14nm now, given it's impressive just how far they've been able to stretch the 14nm process node, and it's pretty impressive, and Intel can at least say that they've done the best with 14nm. They've stretched it out and they've been able to squeeze the most performance out of a single process node, which in one respect is quite impressive, but at the same time when the likes of AMD storming ahead on smaller process nodes to squeeze out even better performance, it's a big reminder. Intel, please wake up, please come back with strong competition. I'm begging for you. We don't want to be in a position where AMD becomes the new Intel and they become complacent in the CPU market and they hold the monopoly on the consumer desktop market. We don't want to be in that position where AMD is currently on track to switch positions to Intel as the king of the CPU market and also that king of the premium CPU market as well. We need good competition to stifle growth in the market and also to deliver fair and competitive prices to us consumers. I want Intel to do this. They've been able to get so far by focusing mainly on the power delivery and also the heat transfer and the IHS. So that would be the heat transfer between the die and the actual IHS heat spreader to get out more performance, so they're able to essentially up the power limits without having to go too overboard on the temperatures, which is what they're trying to do, instead of focus on a new process node, which all of us gamers and all of us creatives really want Intel to do. This is the last of 14nm. It has to be the last. Otherwise, Intel, you're in deep trouble. You're in deep trouble indeed. Now, yes, 10nm is rolling out on the mobile variants of Intel processors, and hopefully that trickles down into the desktop market soon. But Intel, please, for the sake of competition, for the sake of your own company, for the sake of us consumers, please come back to being competitive. Yes, it's good to see you in survival mode and fight mode, but we need you to see you on top form to further promote growth and development in the CPU market. And hopefully with the current shake-up at Intel, we're going to see just that soon. I hope you found today's video interesting and informative and you've enjoyed today's little discussion. And let me know in the comments down below, what do you think of the current state of the CPU market? What do you think of Intel's current business moves and current development moves? Let me know in the comments down below. And what CPU are you currently looking forward to, or CPU are you currently running? Are you someone who wants to go all AMD, or currently still holding out for Intel? Let me know in the comments down below. Anyway, if you enjoyed today's video, make sure to give it a like, dislike it if you dislike it for some reason, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this in the future. Anyway guys, I've been Matt from AMD Tech, and I hope to see you in another video soon. Goodbye.